If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. There's a lot to like about Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists, but I really enjoyed all the song references. There's some lyrics from legendary bands like Black Sabbath and Iron Butterfly and the Eagles, but this one's probably my favorite. Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists, at least to me, came out of nowhere, yet immediately hooked me with its Game Boy Color-esque aesthetics. I'm talking the square aspect ratio, the beeps and boops, the color palette. The game seems to run on the antiquated system's limitations and has built a world I swear I played in as a kid in the backseat of my mom's Beretta on a long road trip to one of my sister's out-of-state cheerleading competitions. I can still taste the surge and Dunkaroos I'd get every time we stopped at a gas station. And though this game appears to be engineered specifically to evoke an overpowering sense of nostalgia for us old men, it still manages to bring a lot new to the table. I'm just gonna be upfront, this is a weird game. Impressively developed solely by Neckbolt's Nicholas Halen with Carl Roskvist at the musical helm, Alruna feels like a pulp comic I'd have found stashed away in my older cousin's closet or something. The premise is so out there yet intriguing. You play as the dryad Alruna, who stylistically looks like a 1950s pinup model, and must wander aimlessly through the sprawl, Earth's wasteland full of mechanized skeletons and rot brought on by the corruption of unchecked capitalism. If that doesn't sound punk as f***. So, the game's got style, but does this roughly 3 to 4 hour Microvania have what it takes to be a good Metroidvania?
Combat.
To put it simply, combat's mediocre to bad in Alruna. Alruna's whip attack is very basic and stops her dead in her tracks when she attacks. But she can at times do this weird slip where she moves while attacking. This typically happens when you attack while landing from a jump. You'd think it wouldn't be that big of an issue, but if you slide into an enemy, you're as good as dead. Alruna essentially has 0 iframes upon getting hit, so you're essentially stuck in place until you die. It's pretty obnoxious. And the whip is pretty much the extent of Alruna's basic attacks. There are other quote-unquote advanced ways to attack, but the more blind you go into this game, the better. I will spoil one thing right now because I'm not really sure if it's a spoiler or not, but I'll throw something up just in case. I know a lot of you watch my stuff on a TV, so when you see this little guy and hear this sound, that means there's a tiny spoiler coming. So just mute or cover your ears and look away and unmute at this specified time. And when this little dude's gone, you're safe to unmute. For everyone not watching on a TV, go to this timestamp to skip the little spoiler. Okay, here we go. You can actually kill enemies by jumping on them. I had no idea this was a thing. Here I am in real time discovering it. It kinda blew my mind. There are a lot of things you can discover in this game on your own, and that's half the fun. So yeah, the more blind you are going in, the better. Let's talk about the bosses. They're kind of a mixed bag. There are 6 in the game, each looking rather amazing I might add, and I'd say over half of them have a sweet spot where you can stand safely and dish out damage without fear of getting hit. I love it because it reminds me of the early boss design from the era Alruna's emulating, but I can see why people might be disappointed by such lackluster boss encounters. But here's the thing, combat is not Alruna's focus. I'd argue that these sweet spots aren't a bug but a feature. Heck, I'd bet my house on it. I guarantee the dev painstakingly designed these sweet spots for players to find. The game advertises its sequence breaking, so the dev knows what he's doing here. And what he's doing is making a speedrunner's dream. So yeah, combat isn't great or revolutionary in Alruna, but it was never intended to be. Though I really don't like the whole slipping into an enemy and dying due to a lack of iframes thing.
Abilities. Platforming.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna be scarce in this section. This is like the 3rd time I've said this, but the more blind you play this game, the better. What I will say is that I thought the unlockable abilities were amazing. Each was unique and fun to use and complemented the level design. And I really liked that the abilities were seeds you could throw. It was just a really cool idea. Let's talk level design for a minute. Alruna takes a single screen level design approach, meaning there is no scrolling in this game. When you enter an area, what you see is what you get. I like this design because it makes solving puzzles and planning on how to approach platforming much easier on your brain, turning each room into a quick snapshot of easily digestible information. And when done well, this design philosophy can make for some interesting dungeon designs. And Alruna's dungeons, or temples as the game calls them, are, in fact, very fun to explore with all sorts of neat gimmicks. But don't think for 1 second that the dev doesn't take this design philosophy and use it against players in challenging ways. But the less said on that, the better, obviously. As for the game's platforming, it's okay. Alruna feels great to control, but there are some quirks. Jumping off vines felt pretty bad, and how the game dealt with respawning after taking environmental damage was strange. If you hit a spike or fell in water, the game would reset you where you entered the screen. 9 times out of 10, this was fine, but check this out. The game would continue to drop me onto the hazard until I deviated myself. It's not the worst thing ever, but it was weird and annoying. This happened on many occasions. The last thing I'll talk about here is the game's puzzles. Puzzles are really just standard gated progression, typically involved finding keys and hitting or stepping on switches. And to this end, Alruna does a great job and leverages its single screen level design to great effect. I never once felt lost or confused, and I thought all the unlockable shortcuts were clever and helpful. Overall, really great temple design. And that'll do it for this section. If you plan on playing Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists, look forward to some decent platforming, a little bit of jank, some great level and dungeon design, and a whole lot of fun and surprises from its unlockable abilities.
Progression.
This may not come as a shock to you, but there's not a lot to cover in this section, and it's not because I'm withholding information. Well, I might be withholding a little information, but mostly there's just not a real progression system in Alruna. This is a Metroid-like, so there's no leveling, XP, gear, or skill trees. Heck, Alruna doesn't even upgrade any of her stats, like defense or attack damage or HP. Although... Fine, I won't spoil anything here. And that's really going to be it for this section. There are side quests, but they're not technically side quests because they're mandatory in order to progress in the game. And though there are other things to collect, I'll talk about those in the next section. For this section, I focus on how your character progresses, and Alruna doesn't really have a progression system or a way to get stronger throughout her journey. But please, don't take this as a criticism. It's merely an observation. The dev clearly had a vision for the game, and the absence of a progression system is a part of that vision. And to that end, I think the lack of a progression system was a good move. Because if you're making a speedrunner's dream, upgrading and getting stronger is never a speedrunner's priority. And for us non-speedrunners, the game's balanced so it doesn't need a progression system.
Exploration.
This is it, boys, the section you've been waiting for. Because, unlike the other sections where I had very little to say or praise, exploration is where Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists nails it. Seriously, I don't even know where to begin. I feel like a kid in a candy store. Let's start with its openness or non-linearity. There are like 6 biomes, 7 if you count the wasteland that connects the biomes, and every single one of them can be accessed pretty much from the beginning. You may not be able to go deep into all of them because you lack an ability or requisite items, but of the 7, you can fully explore 4 out the gate. Well, technically 3 because 1 requires you to find 4 of an item before allowing entry into the biome proper, but you can gather these items and get in there fairly quickly. And I haven't even mentioned all the secret sequence breaking paths that can make this game even more open. I'm saving it for the spoiler section, calm down. Here's a little example of how open the game is. I didn't even fight a single boss until I found every ability. And the first boss I fought was in the Engineer's Palace, a mid to late game biome that requires you to gather certain abilities and items before you can even enter it. I don't know what I was doing. I was just going all over the place aimlessly and having fun, I guess. And though recklessly exploring all these biomes nearly unhindered and getting lost can be a reward in and of itself, it's also rewarding in that there is a lot of cool stuff to find and experience. Most of the really cool and unique stuff I don't plan on spoiling even in the spoiler section, but let me tell you, some of the really hidden stuff you can find is really cool. And that's something else this game does very well. Hide stuff. Yeah, there's a breakable wall here and there, no big deal. But when you start discovering how some of these things are hidden, even in plain sight, it'll boggle your mind. I don't use the term Metroidvania often, but Alruna is sorta like a Metroidvania, or it at least has Metroidvania elements like knowledge gating, in that there are more options available to you than you initially believe. And I'll just leave it at that because, like I've been saying, the more blind you are going in, the better. Now, don't think Alruna is a true Metroidvania. It's not going to flip your perspective with its revelations. It's more going to make you say something like, I could have done that the whole time? That absolutely breaks the game. And yes, these revelations will 100% break the game. It's glorious. Needless to say, exploration is very fun and rewarding. There's lots to do and find and plenty to keep you intrigued and motivated. And the in-game map is pretty solid. You can't mark it up, but it automatically notates points of interests like save points and warp points. Yes, even this short game has fast travel. And dewdrops. Dewdrops are hidden and sometimes not so hidden water droplets sprinkled throughout the world that do something as you collect them. But I'll let you discover what that is. I'm sorry I'm being so vague, but not knowing what's going on is part of the game's experience that I just don't want to steal from you. I think I'll call it quits on this section for now and probably bring up more exploratory stuff in the spoiler section. Just know that exploring and discovering stuff in Alruna's world is a blast. When the dev said Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists was a compact, tightly packed Metroidvania, he wasn't kidding. There's a lot here in such a tiny package.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
Like I said in the intro, this game is weird, and it revels in its own weirdness. I mentioned the Game Boy Color-esque aesthetics earlier, so I won't harp on that, but I'd like to bring up the game's music. It sounds appropriately beepy and boopy, but there's only like 2 or 3 tracks in the entire game. I may be exaggerating, but I may not be either. The game seems to be using a leitmotif approach in that each track is basically the same track, but either sped up or slowed down. It's fine for what it is. Moving to narrative, I think the game does a good job at using color to reinforce its core theme, which is the struggle between chaos and control, with verdant greens representing chaotic life and murky browns representing the ultimate control over life, death. It's nothing I'd describe as avant-garde, nor is it anything we haven't seen before, but it's still well done, especially when you consider the dev's self-imposed limitations to give the game its Game Boy Color feel. The dev goes one step further to deepen the game's symbolism to not just be about chaos versus control or life versus death. He uses dryads, the personification of life, to represent the natural human condition of liberty. And he uses capitalism, personified as mechanized skeletons and rot, to represent the force oppressing and killing the dryads and planet Earth itself. To sum it up nicely, as the late great Norm Macdonald would put it,
no offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Obviously, like most social commentary, things have been exaggerated to an absurd degree to make a point. And though the communist and/or socialist rhetoric is excruciatingly heavy-handed, it adds to the game's charm and makes for an interesting and thought-provoking tale that I loved. It really is punk as f***. I also loved the game's cringy lyric-based dialogue sprinkled throughout the adventure. It was always fun trying to figure out what song was being referenced whenever I met a new NPC. I know I was messing around in my cold open, but this one is legit my favorite. What an obscure System of a Down reference, right? The last thing I want to discuss in this section is the game's endings. There are 2 in total, at least that's what I found. And I think the dev said it best when he described the endings as the combat ending and the exploration ending. Honestly, these endings are exactly what I want in my MVs. A blunt force ending and a more nuanced, thoughtful ending that requires a little finesse to discover. Anyway, I guess I'd like to say I enjoyed the endings well enough. The combat ending reinforced the game's theming nicely, and the exploration ending did what it had to do to show the opposite of the combat ending. I'm being vague for obvious reasons. My only bit of criticism is that once you beat the game, you cannot go back into the file. So if you want to see the other ending, or say get footage from your completed game save, you're out of luck and have to restart from the beginning. It's not so bad because the game's so short, but still kinda a hassle. Here's my in-game stats. It took me about 3 hours to finish it the first time and 2 to finish my second playthrough. I could have completed my second run quicker, but there was so much I hadn't discovered in my first playthrough, so I was taking my time to figure out some things. So, if you hadn't guessed, the ending kinda caught me by surprise my first run. Alright, spoiler time. I'm about to wreck this game for anyone who hasn't played it yet. So if you have even a passing interest in playing Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists, I implore you to fast travel to my final thoughts and score using the timestamp on the screen now.
Spoilers.
Welcome to the spoiler section, where every little thing is brought up and the format don't matter. First off, just look at how open and sequence breaky this game really is. I'm not one to sequence break, but I unlocked the exploration ending without collecting all the dewdrops. This game really is designed for you to break all the rules. I freaking love it. As for the Metroidvania part, you'll discover some of the easier stuff early on thanks to some tablets, like the ability to slide and the charged jump. Both are things you start with, you just don't know it yet. And restarting the game with the knowledge of these two moves makes for a very different experience. But the coolest instance of Metroidvania-ness comes in your seeds. Alruna tosses seeds that do a variety of things to help her traverse this world. But each seed actually has a second form right from the start. And you only learn about these second forms if you find a hidden NPC in an optional biome. FYI, this NPC is a character from Neckbolt's Molly Medusa, Queen of Spit.
Huck to and spit on that thing.
Sorry, I could not use that meme. It's meme law. Oh, and Yono's here too, for all you Neckbolt fans. Anyway, to use a seed's second form, you have to crouch 3 times before the seed hits a surface. And that's it. It's really that simple. But who would have thought to do that? That's the beauty of Metroidvanias. Oh, and another testament to how open this game is, I found this NPC before I found a single seed, so I had no clue what she was even talking about. This game really just sets you in this world and is like, do whatever the fuck you want. The dev begs you to break his game. Want proof? Look at these seeds' second forms. One heals you completely, and another gives you instant fast travel ostensibly to the game's hub. Want more proof? This seed's second form summons a butterfly that collects dewdrops for you, negating all platforming challenges. And this seed's second form, it's the brokest of all. It unlocks every door in the game, aside from the skull door. This makes every key and every switch pointless, and I freaking love it. Imagine having all this power at your disposal and you didn't even know you had it. I went through my first playthrough not even knowing what the Skullflower did, even though I knew how to summon it. And when I figured it out by accident, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Discovering all this stuff on your own, especially when you had the power all along, is an amazing feeling. And I feel terrible if you watched this spoiler section without playing the game first. I genuinely feel like you robbed yourself of an amazing experience. But if you still needed proof that the dev wants you to absolutely obliterate this game, watch this. That's right. I just picked up the Vine Seed by sliding through a secret tunnel on the game's very first screen. Full disclosure, I did not discover this on my own. I watched a speed run after completing the game twice, and I saw this particular runner's vid that said they beat the game in 16 minutes. I was like, there's no way. They must be using glitches. Nope. Only the tools provided in the game. And when I saw them slide and grab that seed, my jaw dropped. And this is not the only instance of a hidden passage leading to an important ability or location. The game's full of this shenanigans. It's so freaking cool, and it will blow your mind. I'll link to the speedrunner in the description if you want to see all the shenanigans yourself. I also wanted to show you this part. I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I couldn't figure out anything to do here. I'll leave this little Easter egg location a secret for you to find. The last thing I wanted to mention was this part. I don't think I've seen a Metroidvania do this before. Basically, this flower is unreachable, but there's a hole here, so I have to throw seeds through it, obviously. I hit it with an exploding mushroom, and it saves my game. I'm like, cool, I guess, and didn't think twice of it. When I turned around and discovered that I was stuck in the area, I decided I'd just kill myself and respawn at my last save point. How far back was that again? Holy shit. And this is the only way to get into this room. I don't know, I thought it was just really clever.
Final thoughts and score.
Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists is a quirky animal. Its Game Boy-inspired aesthetics and strange yet charming world evokes a sense of nostalgia like no other game I've played recently. And while its combat is clunky and feels somewhat restrictive, the game excels in its exploration, with copious amounts of secrets and sequence-breaking possibilities that'll delight speedrunners and casual MV fans alike. That being said, the odd iframes issue that gets you stuck in an enemy until you die, and the odder respawn quirk detract slightly from the experience, but not enough to drastically hurt the game. I just can't get enough of Alruna's open-ended world and secrets. It's such a unique experience that handsomely rewards curious players. If you can overlook some of the game's jank, you'll find a lot to love in this Metroidvania that's punk to the core. I award Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists an 8 out of 10.
Tier placement.
I'm gonna be frank. I love Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists. It's a Metroidvania that's a near perfect microcosm of what I want in an MV's exploration. Non-linearity, intrigue, unique abilities, secrets, and more secrets. And I mean substantial secrets. Secrets that will alter how you interact with the game in major ways. Would Alruna's approach to exploration work in a larger Metroidvania? Probably not, but who's to say? All I can say is that it works magnificently for Alruna's short runtime. Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists plants itself snugly in the A tier. I'm telling you, to all MV enthusiasts, or Metroidvaniers, as I shall be calling you moving forward, do not sleep on Alruna and the Necro-Industrialists. It is short but mighty, which is exactly what she said.